You're watching UATV News. My name is Inna Kosinska. Good evening. 3 hours, hundreds of media and thousands of sharp questions. Volodymyr Zelenskyy summed up the results of the second year of his presidency during a broad press conference. The head of state answered numerous journalist questions, including on countering Russian aggression in the Donbass, the return of the occupied Crimea, and many others. The most important topics discussed in the following review.
We should stop the war as soon as possible. I really want that. I believe that it is possible. You know, in fact, 99% depends on the Russian Federation. I don't know if they are proud of it or not, but it is what it is. The issue of freezing the conflict is the 1% I'm talking about.
Щодо державного референдуму.
As for the state referendum, I believe that the first question should concern the main issue we deal with now. I believe that this is the situation in Donbass, and I'm sure that it will take place after a while, as now we have several plans like Plan A, B, or C. As for the cessation of the war and the return of our temporarily occupied territories and people, we plan to submit this topic to the public discussion. This could be one of the plans, given the others don't work.
Буде багато представників багатьох країн.
Representatives of many countries will arrive, and a number of important documents will be signed on this platform. Presidents, prime ministers, heads of churches of other countries will visit Ukraine. Foreign ministers are invited as well. I think there will be a total of 30 countries participating.
Головний зміст і філософія.
The main message in our philosophy is we do not want to destroy large business, but we are definitely ruining the concept, content and influence of the oligarchic system in our country. There will be no oligarchs' influence on the mass media. There will be no influence on politics. There can be no influence on the officials.
Не просто. Не все залежить від.
It isn't that easy, not everything depends on me. To be honest, I hold discussions with the government so that we increase both the minimum wage and pensions. It's not easy for them, it is not easy to fill the budget. The economy is not developing well, slow enough because of the COVID. The era of poverty will end only when everyone pays taxes, when there is deregulation and the state is maximally digitalized. All this will happen, be sure.
Estonia supports Ukraine in becoming a full member of the European Union. This was said in a joint statement signed by President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas. According to her, the government will help Ukraine meet the criteria for joining NATO and the European Union. Besides, this week Kaja Kallas, together with the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Reintegration of the Temporarily Occupied Territories of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov, visited the contact line in Donetsk region.
The main and the most important point in this statement for Ukraine was Estonia's support for Ukraine's European aspirations. The document indicates that Estonia has consistently supported Ukraine's European integration course. It supports the reforms that Ukraine is implementing. It is ready to assist Ukraine in meeting the membership criteria, and as a result, Estonia has made it clear that it sees Ukraine in the European Union. When Ukraine is ready to apply for membership, Estonia will definitely support such an application.
The new appointments in the Ukrainian government. This week, the parliament resigned 3 ministers and appointed new ones. Namely, those are ministers of infrastructure, economy and health. Our correspondent will tell you more about the plans and tasks of the new members of the cabinet.
293 votes for. Decision approved. 293 MPs voted to appoint Oleksiy Lyubchenko Minister of Economy. Besides, he's also taken the post of First Deputy Prime Minister. Prior to his appointment, Lyubchenko chaired the State Tax Service. The new minister identified the development of small and medium businesses and the achievement of economic independence of Ukraine as the main priorities of his work. It is extremely important to continue cooperation with international partners, including the IMF. We plan to give a new impetus to the work of an expert credit agency as well. Besides, we'll also deal with improvement of the international trade cooperation system. We'll determine the priorities of geoeconomic activities of Ukraine and restore the effective operation of trade and economic missions. Alexander Kubrakov became the Minister of Infrastructure. Earlier, he chaired the state agency of roads Ukravtodor. In 2019, he became the Member of Parliament, being in the list of the Servant of the People Party, and later won the competition for the post of Chairman of the State Agency of Roads of Ukraine. As for the results of 2020-2021, we are going to repair almost 40% of the main roads of the state. Among my priorities on the minister's position, I'd like to mention the following. If we talk about railway transport, first of all, this is stabilization of the financial condition of the state railroad agency Ukrzaliznytsia. If we talk about the work of the State Transport Safety Service, this is, first of all, the start of automatic truck weight control. Former ministers Ihor Petrashko and his colleague Vladislav Krikly will receive new posts and continue their work, the president assured. However, as for ex-Minister of Health Maxim Stepanov, this situation is not that simple. The Prime Minister could no longer work with Minister of Health Stepanov. I didn't intervene into the situation for a long time. I was afraid of destabilization in this complicated time of COVID pandemic when replacing the Minister of Health. The chief state-centered doctor of Ukraine, Viktor Lashko, became the new Minister of Health. He said fight against COVID-19 pandemic would become his main task on the post. I worked in the Ministry of Health as a chief specialist, head of a division and director of a department. Overcoming coronavirus disease is a top priority issue for me. We will do everything so that Ukrainians can get vaccines, work and travel. But this pandemic is not over yet, and unfortunately it is not the last. That is why the biological protection of our citizens will become a priority for the ministry. According to Viktor Lashko, the first step in fight against coronavirus is vaccination of Ukrainians. They plan in the ministry to fully vaccinate 5 million Ukrainians during the summer. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Artem Holub, UATV News.
More than 1 million Ukrainians were administered coronavirus vaccines. As of May 21st, according to the Ministry of Health, 19,000 citizens more have received the jabs. Meanwhile, the daily number of infected has again reduced. A little less than 5,000 Ukrainians got COVID-19. The majority of the infected were registered in Kyiv, as well as in Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. Until the end of May, Ukraine will receive another 350,000 doses of Pfizer vaccines. Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal informed this during Q&A hour in Parliament on Friday. According to him, despite delays in the supply of vaccines, Ukraine plans to immunize most of the country's adult population by the end of the year. Ukraine will receive 34 million doses under direct contracts with manufacturers and another 8 within the framework of the COVAX Global Initiative.
Contracts for 21.2 million doses of vaccine have been signed with Pfizer, including 1.2 million doses under the COVAX initiative. 240,000 doses of vaccines supplied within the COVAX have already been delivered to Ukraine. By the end of May, almost 350,000 doses more should be delivered, 500,000 in the second quarter. Other deliveries are planned for the third and fourth quarters.
Thousands of amendments, blocking of the parliament's work and lots of myths. This is how land reform started in Ukraine. However, starting July 1st, the law on the land market comes into force. It allows the sale and purchase of agricultural land. The Cabinet of Ministers forecasts that the cost of land will increase significantly. Our correspondent will tell you more.
The ban on the sale of Ukrainian land was introduced 20 years ago as a temporary norm. But in practice, the moratorium has only put this market into the shadows. Now the country is preparing for land reform and the first steps have already been taken. On April 28th, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine voted for the transfer of land from state ownership to local communities. The bans will be lifted. In addition to this law, the parliament has approved a bill from the land reform package on land deregulation and decentralization, which allows communities to manage their lands. The bills radically simplify the process of obtaining the land, and they take away a bunch of unnecessary approvals. Experts have already counted that no more than 10% of the land will go on sale at the start of the reform, and the price of a hectare will grow gradually. Prime Minister of Ukraine predicts that after the launch of the land market, the price of the lands will increase by 2 to 5 times. Ukrainians will receive the right, not the obligation, to sell their land. And the right provides with an opportunity to decide. The land has risen in price. Given there is no land market, one couldn't even think about selling it at a high market price without any corruption tax imposed by the officials. Starting July the 1st, owners of agricultural plots will have the full right to sell their shares, while farmers will get the right to move from leasing to direct management. And starting January the 1st, 2024, the large Ukrainian companies will be also able to purchase lands, but no more than 10,000 hectares each. The issue of selling land to foreigners will be submitted to all Ukrainian referendum. Access of the foreign capital to Ukrainian land resources is limited. This is also an outright ban to sell lands to foreign law firms. This is also a limitation of indirect acquisition through corporate rights. This is only the beginning of the land reform implementation, experts say. The next step is consideration of the law on electronic land tenders. And the State Service for Geodesy, Cartography and Cadastre should complete the inventory of lands and finalize the cadastral map of the country, including a complete list of state-owned, communal and private lands. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Diia Nasonenko, UATV News.
A minute of silence, poems and songs in the Ukrainian and Crimean Tatar languages were heard on May 18 all over Ukraine. The country honored the memory of victims of the deportation of the indigenous people of Crimea. Our journalists will tell you more about the tragic history of the genocide of the Crimean Tatar people.
The deportation of the Crimean Tatar people 77 years ago and the occupation of Crimea in 2014. The crimes committed first by the Stalinist regime and then by Putin became two of the most serious tragedies in the history of Crimea and its indigenous people. Return to homeland became possible only in the last years of Soviet Union and especially after the proclamation of Ukraine's independence. And again we faced the Russian occupation, repressions, forcing of the indigenous people to leave their homeland. Again the immigrants from Russia started to massively resettle to the peninsula. And again the terrorist regime was installed there. In many of its parameters, it is similar to the Soviet regime in its most brutal periods. Crimea will be free. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy is sure. Ukraine is doing everything possible to return it.
Дорогі громадяни,
Dear Ukrainians, Crimean Tatars often compare their people to swallows who inevitably return home. Thousands of kilometers from the native land, culture, language and religion, when even the mention of Crimea was dangerous, and children were forbidden to draw the sea and during the census were allowed to call themselves only Tatars without the word Crimean. So despite all this, they never doubted that the day would come and they would return to their native Crimea. 77 years later, in the Crimean house, with the help of art, they recalled how the deportation of the Crimean Tatars took place. The installation Dawn was presented there.
You feel the warmth of those people who were deported when you sit down on their beds. It creates the full atmosphere of the fact that someone's life has just been here. Someone here was sleeping peacefully and in 15 minutes this person was gone. Sitting down on the bed, you can listen to eyewitnesses' recollections of the deportation.
Descendants of the deported recall how the indigenous people of Crimea were forcibly sent to Uzbekistan and neighboring regions of Kazakhstan and Tajikistan. I did not witness the deportation, but I was born in a place of deportation. I was born in Uzbekistan. And thanks God, my parents and I returned to the Crimea in 1988. I saw how my grandmother entered her home and cried. Although my generation did not witness deportation, this pain remains. According to official data, the Soviet government deported more than 180,000 people. According to unofficial figures, more than 400,000. Arrests and searches in the houses of the Crimean Tatars continue till now. Arrests that take place in relation to pro-Ukrainian citizens, the absolute majority of whom are Crimean Tatars, take place at 4 in the morning. This is psychological pressure and a reminder to the Crimean Tatars that the deportation took place in 1944. Then it started at exactly 4 in the morning. If 70 years ago Stalin deported the Crimean Tatars accusing them of treason, the present Putin's Russia is doing almost the same thing. It accuses the Crimean Tatars of terrorism.
More than 130 citizens are now held in Crimean prisons. Most of them are Crimean Tatars. Most of them are imprisoned on cases of extremism and terrorism. All of them are accused of trying to violate the integrity of the Russian Federation.
On the eve of the Day of Remembrance of the victims of the Crimean Tatar genocide, the occupation authorities traditionally distributed the so-called warnings on the peninsula and added invitations to the prosecutors' offices this year. In Buyukan law, they set a condition that there should be only tricolors without the use of Crimean Tatar symbols. And they gave instructions to hold solemn events in honor of the Day of Memory of victims of deportation from Crimea. Of course, for some officials, our tragedy is a holiday, so they tried to make a celebration. The international community will help restore the rights of the Crimean Tatars and liberate Crimea from Russian occupation. Summit of the International Crimean Platform is to be held in Kyiv on August 23, 2021. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Svetlana Sich, UATV News.
A state without papers. This year, just before the Independence Day on August 24, Ukrainians will be able to submit all documents and certificates in electronic form. This was stated at the All-Ukrainian 30 Digitalization All-Ukrainian Forum by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Through a Diia mobile application, Ukrainians can store all the necessary documents in their smartphones. More than 10 million Ukrainians have already used this electronic public service.
24 серпня
On August 24, 2021, Ukraine will enter the paperless era. No papers for government agencies. No one will demand from a citizen of Ukraine a piece of paper or any certificate for the provision of public services. And we will do everything so that the state stays without papers.
They state in the government, due to Diia application, Ukraine should become the most convenient country in terms of provision of public services. There are about 50 of them available on the service website. Among them, payment of taxes and business registration. Besides, the application provides a legal digital version of the most needed documents, including birth certificate of a child, certificate of an IDP, tax number, internal and foreign passports, students' IDs, driver's licenses, registration certificates, and car insurance.
By 2024, we plan to digitize all government services and provide them online. Next, we want 95% of citizens to have access to the internet, both mobile and fixed internet. We also want to teach 6 million Ukrainians basic digital literacy and triple the volume of incomes in the IT industry.
The Ministry of Digital Transformation states that users of the application do not have to worry about the security of their personal data. They are protected. And starting June, they start searching for the vulnerabilities of the Diia application. The ministry is going to involve the so-called white hat hackers from all over the world. They will be granted an opportunity to carry out cyber attacks on a copy of the service. Thus, they will try to find and fix the flaws in the system and prevent any real hacking attempts. If the hacking is successful, the testers will receive a reward.
На середовище тестовому розгортаємо Дію.
Conducting a test, we deploy Diia and they start attacking. And thus we find vulnerabilities. We pay them money for each vulnerability revealed. If the vulnerability is small, then they get $1,000, for example. They found just one unimportant thing and we fixed it very quickly.
Access to the internet for 95% of citizens is a task of the Ministry of Digital Transformation. The department states that the goal is ambitious, since even in Europe the average access rate is 78%. To bring the network to all settlements, the ministry started the Internet Subvention program, accepting applications for the internet from the heads of the United Territorial Communities. And at the same time, the success of Ukraine is transferring public services to digital format is marked in Europe as well.
Already this year, we are launching a program of internet subventions, with the help of which more than 3,000 settlements and more than 6,000 social institutions, including schools, will be linked to the up-to-date means of communication. We have already gathered previous applications and saw that this service and this subvention is in demand.
And I'm sure we have a lot to learn from Ukraine. You have a chance to outrun us, and I'm very worried about this, so we have to keep up the speed. You can skip some of the development stages that we had and leapfrog into the future. And you are doing it already with the mobile-first approach, having your passport on your smartphone.
Bright, multicolored Ukrainian socks knitted in the town of Rubizhne in eastern Ukraine are sold not only in Ukraine, but also in Czech Republic, Slovenia and Moldova. How is such a simple and nevertheless necessary clothing as a sock created? Our colleagues know more.
Hosiery manufacture in Rubizhne, a huge warehouse filled with threads. They are ordered from India. A 15-tons container is empty within 2 months. The whole manufacturing process is mechanized. The knitting machine creates a sock in a minute. We change the bobbin. It sometimes happens that a bundle stretched out there or hit the needle. That's why we change it. All is done quickly. This factory was first established as a small business 27 years ago. 10 years ago it was expanded. If earlier there were only 20 knitting machines, today they employ 77 Italian machines. The quality of the produce is controlled strictly.
It is important to avoid holes so that all the stitches are in place. We cooperate with many Ukrainian sock brands. When foreigners found out that their product is made in Ukraine, they were surprised and very happy about it.
After a sock is knitted, it goes to the sewing workshop. Masters work here by hand.
We do 42,000 per shift, 420 pieces.
Before packing, the socks should be ironed.
It's up to 70-80 degrees.
The manufacturer's produce can be found in Kyiv, Odessa and Lviv. In addition, residents of Moldova, Slovenia and the Czech Republic wear socks from the Luhansk region as well.
Czech factories cannot do the designs we do. The most difficult designs are always sent here, because they cannot do them there. They don't have modern machinery with as many needles as we have.
In 2020, the factory began to cooperate with the USAID project. Thanks to it, the factory received another customer from the Netherlands.
Basically, we'll do children's socks. They manufacture newborn kids. It's like a traditional gift they have in the Netherlands.
We plan to expand. In December, we defended our business development strategy for the purchase of new Italian equipment. This is a way to a higher level, because in Ukraine there are only a few factories with such equipment. More than 140 employees work in the Rubizhne hosiery factory. After the USAID grant is distributed, they plan to hire 20 workers more. Over the past year, about 2 million pairs of socks were knitted here. Reported by Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Anastasia Volkova, UATV News.
Masterpieces of patchwork sewing, works and the patchwork technique by the craftswoman Zelenskyy are presented at the Magic of Color exhibition in the Center of Ukrainian Culture and Art in Kyiv. Our correspondents have also visited the exhibition. This blanket seems to be drawn and not made of pieces of cloth. When the lights are turned off, the real magic begins. This is the kaleidoscope technique. This was one of the first works. I decided to try it. It turned out to have 16 wedges. I sewed it for about a year. This is nearly 1,500 pieces.
The author chose 13 quilts for the exhibition The Magic of Color. It took 10 years to create them. She worked exclusively by hand for 5 hours a day. Miri learned the basics of the patchwork technique from the famous American craftswoman Jeannie Bayer. She selects the color scheme of fabrics for the works intuitively.
You see the geometric compasses. The color play just goes on. One and the same pattern. Simply due to different fabrics, a 3D effect is created. Each work seems to move like a kaleidoscope, as if the colors are changing. Some kind of meditative effect. I want to think about something, meditate and dream.
In 2019, the works of Zelenskyy were appreciated at the International Patchwork Festival in the USA. This is her first exhibition in Ukraine.
This is first and perhaps the only craftswoman in Ukraine who has reached a level of work with color that no one in Ukraine has yet achieved.
The patchwork sewing requires perseverance, patience, accuracy, precision and good eyesight. Needles for patchwork are very small.
It does not allow to touch the fabric twice. I can only make one stitch.
The Magic of Color exhibition will be held until June the 9th. Reported by Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Olena Diduch, UATV News.
That's all for this hour. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Twitter and Facebook pages. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.